technical seminars are an Intertech production. For instructor-led .NET, Java, and XML courses, visit us at www.intertech.com.
And finally, at some point, you'll want to do localization testing. This can fall typically at the end of the project. Now, that's not to say that you're not working with iterations and this testing doesn't happen several times, but the idea is that localization testing is when we receive back from the translation services these localized bundles, and we're not really testing the application for functional verification, which we're doing with our unit testing and whatnot. Instead, we're really looking for things like, is the text showing up as French when it should be French and German when it should be German? Are the words that we used, do they make sense? Now, the translation of the words may be correct, but in the context of what they're being used, does that make sense? So this should already give you a hint that during the stage, you're going to need someone who's very familiar with the language or the region to be able to ensure that the context of the words is valid. You're also going to want to do some GUI testing at this point. There are words that can grow much, much bigger depending on what language that they're being localized to, or conversely, they could get smaller. Now, that could potentially offset your graphical user interface. So those are the kinds of things that you're going to want to do during the testing. We'll talk about more of these stages during this presentation, but right now these are the 3 stages that you're going to want to incorporate into your existing software development methodology. So let's just jump into the topic of internationalization, which is really what you're going to spend most of your time doing when you're globalizing your software. So what do you do when you're internationalizing your application? You identify content that should change depending on a user's region. We'll talk about that content and different ways that you can pull it out in a few minutes. But once you've identified that content, you want to remove it from the application so that it's no longer hard-coded, and place them into external resources. These become known as resource bundles. Once the content has been externalized, you can use API methods through either libraries provided by Java right out of the box or third-party utilities. And we use these methods, these objects, to delegate the lookup and rendering of this content. So it doesn't happen until runtime. At that point, we are able to dynamically switch between different languages or regions. Now, internationalization does not mean that your application supports more than one region. If I say my application is internationalized, that doesn't mean it's going to automatically work with French or German or Hindi or whatever language or region I want to work with. It just means that all the hard-coded regional information has been extracted. So now if I need to support another locale, another region, support another language, then I'm not going to have to make any changes to my source code. What I should be able to do is go through the localization process, have another resource bundle created, and it should automatically be able to then delegate at runtime and choose this new region and support it in my application. So internationalization just is really, again, just pulling out this hard-coded information and setting up the API methods. One of the key objects that you use when you're internationalizing, and actually also used at runtime to decide what locale specific information should be displayed, is an object called a locale. It's a Java object that represents various types of information for either a user or a machine. The object itself doesn't do too much. It's more or less a label that just says, what locale is this user interested in having data translated into. And what happens is then at runtime, this object is passed around into various helper objects and methods that are going to use that object to make decisions about what type of materials should be displayed for the actual user. Now, when you build a locale, you have 3 different properties that you can potentially use: a language, a country, and a variant. So a language is kind of the most obvious of our locale settings. In fact, a lot of people, when they think about supporting another region, this is all they're really thinking about. They're thinking, I've got my application. Today it's written in English. I've just been told it now has to display information in French. And so I need to be able to change the language from English to French dynamically at runtime. So the locale can be configured just to represent a language. That's the minimum that you would need to create a locale. So when you want to represent the language, we do so using a 2-letter ISO standard. It's ISO 639-1. It's a language code. And some examples, you probably have seen these around before. EN for English, DE for German, ES for Spanish. Again, this is a ISO standard, so you can look this up. At the bottom of slide 11, I do have a URL that has the language codes, so you can take a look and see what those are. There is a newer 3-letter standard known as ISO 639-2. For backwards compatibility, it's best to stick with the 2-letter standard. Second property that a locale can be configured with is a country. And so a country is initialized with an uppercase 2-letter language code, also an ISO standard. This standard is 3166. So some country code examples: US for the United States, CA for Canada, IN for India. And again, on the bottom of slide 12, I have a URL so that you can look up what the different country codes are that are available. The third property of a locale is not used as frequently as the first two, and that's a variant. It's just a way to further differentiate the region or user for specialized displays. Things that you want to do that that you'll use in your application that give you a little bit of more information. It's really an arbitrary string of your choice. There's no ISO standard here. So a variant could be a brand that you want to vary. Maybe you're supporting, you have a web application and you have different companies that come in, and you want to, not only have the right language displayed for the user, but you want to also have the right branding for that user. Well, you could use a variant to specify what brand they have. A common example that you'll find in textbooks about internationalization is they'll differentiate between a Windows or a Macintosh user using like Win for Windows and Mac for Macintosh. So that's possible as well. Now, when you create the locale, you can use these 3 properties, but there are only a few combinations that are possible. You can create a locale with only the language code. That's perfectly fine. A lot of applications do that. You can also create a locale with a language and a country code. Third is a locale with a language, a country code, and a variant code. Those are your 3 choices.
For more free learning resources and to see the latest lineup of our instructor-led .NET, Java, and XML courses, visit us at www.intertech.com.